Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the ISM Lunch and Learns. Today we're going to be taking a look at Crystal Reports 101, how to modify, become familiar with your Crystal Report settings that are available to you in your Sage 100 system. Presenting to us today is Mr. George Wirtjes, and of course I'm going to stumble. And with that, I'm going to turn everything over to George and let him get started. George, thank you and welcome.
Great, thanks. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's George. I'm one of the senior ERP consultants / network guys at ISM. Crystal Reports is probably one of the more favorite tools out there for us. I'm going to basically walk you guys through some basic customization of some pre-existing forms, and then I'm also going to talk to you guys about setting up a basic blank report from scratch. And if we have time at the end, towards the end, I wanted to show you guys some cool tools out there that are used for scheduling and things like that, Crystal Reports. So you can set up schedules and email Crystal Reports to fire off and do things on the fly. We'll also open it up for questions and answers if you guys have any questions, or if there's something that you want to ask specifically on when I'm covering a topic, just basically send us a chat in the window or speak up. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Basically what we're looking at here is if everybody can see the screen, we're looking at SAP Crystal Reports version 2011. This one is the one that works with version 2014, 15, and 16. There's a couple ways to open it. Basically, you're going to open it from either the SAP Crystal Reports launcher, or you're going to do it from the panel in the designer, and that's kind of how I'm going to show you now. We'll go ahead and open up the sales order printing module. That's one of the more common forms that gets modified. If you see over here in the right-hand corner, you'll see this designer button. That's actually going to launch your Crystal Report designer. So it'll bring up that Crystal Report format and let you launch it. This obviously will put you into the form that you requested the design on. Some of you are pretty good at Crystal as it is now. Some of you understand how to add fields and things of that nature. What we'll do here is we'll just cover some basics. We'll go ahead and get started. This is your basic sales order form. A lot of times we get requests to add like website addresses in here in the address block, or we'll get requests to do a formula to total up a carton count, which I know some of you are familiar with. This is your overall layout of Crystal. So you've got your headers, your groups, your detail sections. This is all the critical data that comes in. On the side over here, if you don't have this window set up now, over to the right, you'll see a field explorer. This is your really, really important part of this. You need this to basically look at the available fields that are available for that report. If you don't have that window when you open Crystal already, the way you would get to that is you would hit View, and then you would hit Field Explorer, and you can actually put it to the right, to the left, wherever you think it's more comfortable for you. This is a really critical tool to have, because this allows you to take fields and attach them to the file, or actually see what fields are being used. So if you look, you can see you have a group field here, you have a sales order number. These are fields that are already situated into the report. A lot of organization and sorting happens at the group level. So you can see here on this particular report where you have a group header, and there's multiple. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all the different groups. So each grouping is going to basically group a detailed item by that group and print it as such on the form. And you can actually define that print variable based on the group header as you go along. So depending on what your needs are, you may only have one group, you may have 10 groups. The groups are also important for things like parameter fields. So I don't know if you guys have worked with parameters or not, but parameter fields are what defines like a range of customers or a range of items or something to that effect. And we'll try to touch base on a little bit of the parameter fields today when I do the blank report. But for now, that is basically how you get into the designer. So you can modify any Crystal report that's available to you inside the system just by utilizing the designer function in there. So if you wanted to, for example, add a website address to this company address block, this is actually a formula. You can actually come into the formula and then add your variable down at the bottom. And if I'm going too fast or you need some further explanation here, just know. But basically, you can come in here and you can say, this is going to be www.yourwebsite.com, and then you just save the formula. If you don't get an error, sorry. Sorry, give me 1 second here. And then when you print this from now on, what you'll see is you'll see that website, yourwebsite.com, show up whenever you print the company address bar. And you can move that address bar, and you can define the size and the variable of that address bar within this formula. So a lot of times what people will also do is not use this formula, and they'll actually just drop in the individual fields. So what this formula here is doing is it's just predefining those fields and kind of structuring it into something that looks like an address. Whereas if you just drop the fields in, it's going to look a little structurally funky, if you will. It wouldn't have the right amount of spacing or characters depending on what size the city, state, and zip were. It could vary and change. So this is a formula that basically designs that field and kind of compacts it together and makes it look pretty and organized. One of the things that I wanted to tell you about is these quotes. So you notice how I put these quotes in here? This quote defines the field type. So within Crystal, if you're utilizing or adding a field or you're adding a text object, you need to basically design it to have those quotes in there. Sometimes it'll be the quotes. Sometimes it'll be a colon. Sometimes it will be a parentheses, a brackets that kind of enclose the item into the statement and make up the formula. So this is a little bit more advanced, and we can cover this in a more advanced course for Crystal. But this is just one of those things that you kind of need to be aware of if you're going to try to add in like a website name or a field, a variable that's not a field. You need to have those quotes in there. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and save and close this, and if we were to look at this now and print this, you would actually be able to see that name. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm hoping that I have an order to print. And there we go. My screen's a little touchy because I'm displaying it, so I apologize for that. And so within that company address line, what we did is we added that yourwebsite.com in there, and that's kind of how we add a field to an existing formula in that sales order form. One of the other common things we get in this is, oh, hey, I want to add a logo in here. I want to drop, my custom logo into this form, and that's a very common thing that we do. And it's really super simple. It's basically just adding an image into the page header, And I kind of want to touch base on that. I don't think I have any very good images, but we'll go ahead and drop something in. So let's just use this, or not. And this will kind of show you guys a little bit about how to put a picture in the file. So let's see if I can find one. Oh, let's see if I can find a image. I don't know why this is not letting me. Hold on one second. Okay, hold on one second. Let me just grab an image from the web or something. I apologize for that. Give me a few seconds because this is kind of cool and you'll like this part. Logo. Well, hold on one second. We'll I think we'll have to come back to that because I don't have an image and apparently my Firefox isn't working. So if I have time, I'll come back to that, show you guys that in a moment. Another thing that we deal with on these reports, and you won't deal with this too much on the customized reports that already exist that you're going to just change through the designer, but you'll deal with the parameter fields. And what parameter fields do is they define those variables for ranges, date ranges, customer ranges, item ranges. And the way that those fields work is they get dropped into the report up at the top here under the selection expert. This is a pretty critical field here. This defines what your selections are. We'll cover this in a second when I go into the blank report, but these parameter fields define those variables. And those variables are already set inside of Crystal for the default program. So if you see this designer and this form, these parameters are already predefined. So does anybody have any questions on the basic functionality of designing a report or adding a report or a field change on the reports? Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. I'm going to show you guys the blank report start because I think that's a much more critical thing. These predefined forms that you can design and add things to. If you guys have any questions on that, feel free to drop me an email or ask me any kind of question you want on adding those forms in there and making some changes to the stock forms. I think the more critical part is, creating a form from scratch, creating a report from scratch, and that's kind of what I want to spend a little bit more time on. So I'm going to open up the Crystal reports, the basic function here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell it that I'm going to create a blank report. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me what connection I want to use, what ODBC connection I want to use for this report. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to create a new connection. And for this connection, I'm going to create an ODBC connection, and I'm going to select the Mass 90 driver. And you should all be able to see this because when you're doing the actual setup of Crystal or Sage, this actually gets dropped in while you're doing the install. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Finish here, and this will just allow me to log into whatever company that I want to generate the report on. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. And this will kind of show me the fields that are available to me based off of that ODBC driver. And they're all down here on the left-hand side. For this report, I guess we can use a pretty common one would be sales order history or sales order invoice detail. So we'll go ahead and pull that up. And the selection is pretty simple. You just scroll down until you find the field that you want, and then you can basically drag and drop. So you just click on this and hit the header and the detail. Now, the reason why you grab both is because the header defines the base information of the file, and the detail is going to have the information like the lines and things of that nature. The lines, the totals, the expended cost amount, and etc. So that's actually setting the report up. So I'm basically saying I want to look at the invoice header, I want to look at the invoice detail, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK on this. It'll ask me what my linking is. Typically, you don't have to do anything with this. If you're designing a more complex report, you may have to change these links, but that's a pretty advanced function. It's something we can cover in a different class. This is just going to be a basic, clean, dirty, simple report. So I've selected my two fields, I've selected my two files, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and that's going to give me a blank window. If I click on this Field Explorer over here and I look at the header and the detail, I can expand these columns. When I'm expanding these columns, I'm going to see the available keys that are available to me. Now keep in mind, if you don't see that Field Explorer, like I said earlier, that's a really critical function. You're going to need to click on View and then click on Field Explorer. That'll bring up this window so that you have this availability. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click and drag, and all I'm doing is I'm going to say I want the invoice number, I want the invoice date, and I want the customer number and the division for the customer, and I want to see, and I'm doing this on purposely overlying it so I can show you guys another feature. So right now, basically what I've done is I've selected the AR number, the customer number, the invoice number, and the invoice date. So as you can see, the AR number, the AR division number, and the customer number kind of overlap each other. I have a couple different ways to do this. I can click on one field and move it down and shrink it up, to whatever I need it to be. Or I can highlight both fields by just simply clicking and dragging over the two fields, and I get a window that will allow me to move both simultaneous. So that's a nice little function there. A lot of people spend hours goofing with that piece because you do one field at a time. It's really kind of a nice thing that you can actually move both at the same time. So let's go ahead and line these up a little bit better, and then we'll clean it up a little. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to move this back. And now I should have a little bit cleaner of a layout. Also, the other thing you can do is, a lot of this is click and drag. You can also use your right and left arrows and move the fields that way as well. So if you want to get a little bit more specific on the layout, or maybe you're seeing that it's not lining up correctly or whatnot, you can actually adjust it just with the arrows, and that's another cool little option for you to design this. So right now I have the AR customer number, I have the invoice number and the invoice date. But what about cost? I want to see some cost associated with this. So I know that everything goes by item code. So I'm going to drop my item code in here, and I'm going to drop the, I'll drop the cost in here so that I can see kind of what I paid based on the cost or whatnot. And then I'm going to grab in the quantity shipped. So I want to see what quantity was shipped. So right now I have a pretty standard report, not too much going on here. It's just giving me some basic information, and I'm adjusting the fields to line up to look a certain way, or to look pretty, if you will. So this is just a basic example of how to drag and drop certain fields and certain links in there. We're going to touch base on this parameter field now. So I want to kind of dive into this because this is kind of important. If I were to hit refresh on this right now, I'm going to get a ton of information, and it's going to be a little bit overwhelming. What parameter fields allow you to do is kind of shrink down that data and make the data a little bit cleaner so that you can see it better and maybe only grab the ranges that you need. So let's dive into that a little bit. The parameter fields are pretty simple. We just click on New, and we're going to add some parameters. So for this parameter, I'm going to go ahead and use invoice date. And because I'm in a test system, I'm going to jump over and take a look at what dates we're running, because I think it's like 2020. So let me just quickly check some of the dates here so that I can put the correct fields in. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is we're going to create a parameter for date. So I'm just going to call this enter date. And I will select the parameter is a date. So I'm going to say it's a date field. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to select that it's got a range. So if you look down here, these are your value options. So you can set different variables or different values for the parameters on these fields. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the parameter is going to be a range. So I'm going to tell it that's true. So it's going to allow me to enter in a range of dates for that parameter. And then I'm going to basically say OK. And that will give me the field. And once I get that field in, now I've got to tell it to look at that field when I run this data. So what am I looking for? Oh, I'm looking to sort this report based on the data that I input at the time I generate the report. So I come up to report here, and I click on Select Expert, and I select the records, because I want to select the records based on invoice date for the range of my parameter field that I'm going to give it. So I'm going to say is equal to my parameter date. And you see that date there, how it's got the question mark and it says enter. Now when I click on this and I hit refresh, and this is the refresh button, by the way, this will allow you to refresh the data on the fly. And if you guys have any questions, again, just drop it in the chat window, or reach out to me afterwards. This is also going to be recorded. It is being recorded, so you'll actually have it to come back to. But this refresh button, if I click on this, it's going to ask me to enter my value. What range do you want to enter in? And you see that we're getting that window now because we've defined that there's a parameter in there, and that we want to use that parameter to kind of filter down some of these reports. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select January 1st of 2020, and I'll select it probably out to July. So we'll select January 1st of 2020 to June of 2020, and let's do that. And then I'll hit OK, and hopefully we'll get some data. And we do not. So hold on one second, and let's get some data here. So 1/15/2020. So I should be getting some sales order data in here. Let's see why we're not getting data. Okay, our parameter is right, and we're looking at our enter date. So we need to figure out why we're not seeing any information. And this is a good thing to know. When we're looking at these fields, if we're getting blank or negative results, we can always come down to the actual field in the Field Explorer, and we can click on it, right-click the icon, and hit Browse Data. And you'll see in here, this is the only data that I have in this history file. And the reason why I'm not getting any data is because I'm selecting for 2020, and this has actually only got history in it from 2016. So let's go back up and change our report. Let's change our selection and make sure that we're selecting that date range 2016. So we'll say prompt for new values, and that's going to let us put in a new value, a new range. So we'll just say 2016 here and 2016 here, and then we'll hit OK. And now we should see some records. So that is a real down and dirty way to basically show you a little bit about the parameters and how a parameter functions. You can also do the same thing with, invoice number or invoice type or customer number. If I wanted to put a parameter number in there for customer, I could come in and I could say, give me a new parameter that a person can fill out that is just the customer. He's only going to be able to run this customer, and he only wants to see maybe this customer, Carter. So we'll go ahead and we'll drop that in, and that way we can kind of show you on the fly another quick way to get a new parameter for like a customer or something to that effect. And parameter can work on any field, basically. You can put a parameter. So we'll just select this as Carter. Let's make sure I'm spelling it right. And now, as you see, once we hit refresh, now we're only getting all the transactions for Carter. So it's a pretty quick way to do those, to filter out some of the data. One of the reasons why I used the sales order invoice history detail, or the invoice header in the history or detail, is because there's a lot of data in those usually. So trying to design a report and go through all of that data can be tedious. And that's what these parameter fields do. They allow you to simply define a range of values so that you can easily sort through and filter these reports. That being said, one of the other things I wanted to show you guys was some basic design functions. So nobody likes an ugly report. People like to have pretty things to look at as far as reporting goes. What I tend to do on some of these is I'll do opposites, or I'll line up detail lines based on the color or the shadow or whatnot. When you drop in a field on Sage with Crystal, the way that it drops it into the page header is it displays it like this, these field headings, and they're kind of ugly. They never look good. And so what I'll usually do is I'll come in here and I'll modify these fields, and I'll bring this up to the top, and I'll undo the underline, and I'll make it look a lot prettier, and I'll line it up right. And I may even make it a different font. So what I'll do here is I'm kind of going to walk you through some of that. So what I did is I basically expand the field, and then I come in here and I kind of line it up a little differently, and I'll say customer number, and then I'll make it a different font. Maybe I'll make it bold, or a 12-point font or whatnot. And I think it looks better when you kind of clean it up this way and you kind of line it up to look a certain way. You can also justify it right and left so that these fields kind of match up and look, kind of lined up like a clean report would. Once that's done, what I'll do is I'll kind of come in here and I'll go, yeah, I would like to have like a box. I want a box around these headings. So I'm going to drop this box in here, and I'm just going to color this box up and make it gray, something like that. So once that box is in, and if you kind of see what I did, it actually made it a little bit bigger. So I'll just shrink it up and get it to align right. And once that's done, what I'll do is I'll shade it up. And I want to show you that function too. So there's my basic box. I'm not going to worry too much about the alignment right now. If you click on the box, the actual box, you have some options if you right-click, and you'll see this format box. With the format box, you can do different things with the box. You can give it, kind of like you would in Excel, you can give it width, you can give it color, you can give it drop shadow, you can give it shading. So that's kind of what I do is I'll go through and I'll look at the colors, I'll decide what I think looks aesthetically pleasing, and I'll drop in some shading. and then I'll just hit OK. So now I have this cute, nice little box that's like highlighted gray, and then I can line my fields up into there, and it just looks a little bit more pleasing. So I can do that all across the board, and I can make this pretty much any of these fields say anything I want. Like item code, you might want it to say item number, or the default field that Sage is putting through isn't what you want it to be called. You want it to be called something different. So that's where this comes into play. And these are basically just text fields that you can modify and call this, item number or whatever. So it's kind of a cool little function there. You cannot change this part. So you can't click in this and modify these fields. You can only do that with the headers. And so you can do anything there. So you could just, in this case, you could do a quantity shift. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea on how to play with this and how to kind of define some of these values to line it up and make it look correct. The other thing that I want to show you, because we have some time, and Sherry, if you want, when we're kind of getting close, you could let me know. I'm only seeing my screen. I'm not seeing any of the other screens.
You have plenty of time. You're good.
Okay, perfect. One of the things that I wanted to show you was grouping by subtotal and grouping by items and grouping by, total dollar amounts, because that's important. People want to know, for this invoice number, for this item, what was my total quantity? So let's cover that real quick, because I think this will be helpful for you guys as well. And one of the things we do here is we click on the field that we want to total. And we're going to get asked, like, what do we want to define it by? Do we want to do it by customer? Do we want to do it by invoice? Do we want to do it by date? How do we want to total it? So I'm going to go ahead and right-click this, and I'm going to hit Insert, and I'm going to hit Summary. And you'll see a box pop up, and what it's going to do is it's going to ask you what field. It's going to tell you what field you clicked on and what field you're trying to summarize. And it's going to ask you, like, what do you want to sum? Do you want to do it by sum? Do you want to do it by average? Do you want to do a count? The most common is sum. And how do you want to insert it? Do you want to insert the grand total? Do you want to have a group? Do you want to base it off group? Do you want to base it off an item number? So what I'm going to do here in this case is I'm going to go ahead and use the grand total, and I'm just going to do a group. I'm going to hit Insert Group, and I'm going to group this off the customer number. And I'll change another thing here so that you guys can kind of get an idea of how it looks when I'm done. So right now it's basically just saying that the total quantity shipped for any item is 10. So this customer got 10 items, and that is the total quantity that they got shipped for all items. What I want to do is kind of show you how it looks when you take that record selection out. So when we originally did this, we defined that we wanted only Carter. What I'm going to do is go back and define it and take this out and leave this blank so that I get all the customers. Hold on one second. Oh, I know. I gotta make this right. Sorry. So on this is a good thing to show you guys. One of the things that I didn't do on this parameter is I didn't make it a range. So this report, the way that I had it set up, was only going to let me put in a customer, a single customer, and that was it. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying the range is going to be from A to Z. So now I'll get the range of customers in that range. And so that'll allow me to basically select that criteria and get those ranges for the numbers. And I think customer number is 15, if I remember correctly. Okay, so it's 20. So we're going to have 20 A's and 20 Z's. So bear with me one second, and let me line that up. And I'll show you kind of how I came up with that. So the value has to have the amount of value from beginning to end. So I'm going to enter in here 20 zeros, 1, and here I'll enter in 20 Z's. And then we'll go ahead and select. So let me explain to you guys what that was, because I know that might have been a little bit confusing. But basically what I did is when I originally showed you the parameter field, I showed you the customer. And then I went back and I said, I only want to see this one customer. But I didn't put a range in for that customer to be able to utilize a multi-selection of customers. I only was allowing myself to be able to enter in one customer. So then I went back and I put in a range of A to Z, and I didn't have the right amount of fields linked in there. And the way that I figured that out is I was still getting 0 data, right? So what I did is I come over and I go, okay, it's got to be something with the way that I'm formatting it. And what I do is I come to the field, and this is a really good habit to get into. When you're not getting the result that you're looking for, if you remember that it's just data and it already has predefined values set for it, then it becomes easy to troubleshoot. Because in this case, I came in here and I know I didn't have 20 zeros or 20 A's or 20 Z's. So I came in here and I looked at this and I browsed the data. And if you look at the data, obviously ABC is not 20 fields or 20 characters, it's 3. But if you look at this heading here, it tells you the type of string it is, or the type of field it is, and the length of that field. Even though there's only 3 characters in this field, I still need to be able to select the possibility of the maximum, which is 20. So by putting in 20 zeros, I'm getting all the numbers, customers, and by putting in 20 Z's, I'm getting all the last out of the alphabet in alphabetical order. So this is a good way to troubleshoot that. And you'll see, once I got that right, and I come back in, now I'm seeing all the orders for ABC, I'm seeing all the orders for Carter, and I'm seeing all the orders for Gen 2. Now, one of the things that you can do on this is you can change the grouping. So right now, I'm just totaling up this quantity shipped based on the customer. I'm saying, show me everything for that customer, and that's it. You can always come back in here and change this summary. So if you click on this field, you can hit Edit Summary. And I might want to say, you know, I don't want to see the total sum based on that, you know, that customer number. I want to see it based on invoice number or invoice date or something to that effect. So I can just hit Cancel, and I would basically just delete out this group header. So you just delete the group, and you come back in here and you go Insert Summary again, and you insert the group, and then this time you would say, you know, I'm thinking I want to see it by, let's do by invoice number. And so now what I'm going to get is I'm going to get the grouping here by invoice number for that customer. And this is another good thing to look at, because what it does is it kind of looks ugly. If you see now, I'm looking at Gen 2, but I'm looking at the invoice 0 to 32, and then I'm looking at Carter, and Carter has 33 and 34. Well, that's kind of an ugly grouping, right? I don't really like that grouping. So without adding a quantity shift or doing a summary, what if I wanted to group this report by, you know, customer number or something to that effect? Well, it's pretty simple. I come up here to Insert, I go to Group, and I'm going to insert this group, and I'm going to call it customer number. So I want to really have that group be my main grouping. And if you see here, we kind of did it backwards. So it wants to put the Gen 2, the group for the Gen 2, below. And that's okay. You can always move it around just like I'm doing now. I can move the group footings around and still maintain the validity of the data the way it is. one of the things that happened to me when I did that is, you see how I made this big gap here? That's because I'm working through preview, and I have this really bad habit of working through preview because I'm a visual person. So whenever that happens, or you get some kind of funky format that you don't really like or you think is not to your liking, go up to Design, and the Design tab is going to kind of show you how it really looks. And all you do is just click the name, drag it up, and you have your preview, and it'll be back to normal. So now you can see that I have the Carter as my customer. So now I know that this customer is Carter without looking down here. I know that this is the invoice, and then I got 34 for the same. So that kind of covers a little bit about groupings, a little bit about summing up totals, and kind of, you know, gives you a rough overview. I'm sure we'll do some more classes about, you know, a little bit more in-depth stuff. But one of the things that I did want to show you is simple formula. So, and I think we have time for it. It shouldn't take too long to do. But doing a simple formula, you know, people tend to get worried about these formulas and how they work and what their function is. And so I kind of want to touch base on this. So let's go ahead and do a formula. So we'll go over here and we'll call this a new formula. And we're just going to call this formula, I don't know, text or test. And so one of the things that it's going to do is bring up a formula editor. And in here I might say, you know, give me a text field that's invoice number plus the invoice date. And I want to see it in one field instead of in two. And we got to put this in here. So whenever we're using a formula, we have to declare the variable. We have to put it in parentheses. And it still doesn't like it because it's a string. Oh, invoice date. That's why. Let's do this. We're going to take date out because I have to define that differently. And it's a little bit more advanced. So let's do invoice header and sales order number. So what I'm doing is I basically just created a formula that says, instead of showing me two fields, I just want to see one field, and I want it to be the invoice number plus the sales order number, all together in one field. And all I'm doing is just putting the fields together in a formula and saying print it to me like that. And we'll go drop it on the field. We'll drop it in the file, and we'll see what it looks like. So in here, we're just going to look at it. That's really, really, really ugly, but you can get the gist of what it is. Basically what I'm doing is I'm just combining the two fields together. And you can do that with pretty much anything. As far as a formula is concerned, we can put spaces in there if we wanted to. We could say plus character 3 and get 3 spaces. We'll cover formulas in a more advanced class, but just to give you a simple idea, something fun to play with is to go in and create these little random formulas if you have time of, you know, numbers that you're trying to get to. And if you think of Excel and how Excel works, the crystal formulas work pretty similar. They're basically taking character values or character pieces, and they're trimming those pieces to make a formula. So if I had a ton of data and I wanted to trim the invoice number or trim, let's say that I knew my invoice number from 100 on was what I really wanted to see, I could go in and I could say, you know, only give me the invoice numbers that are greater than 100. There's a couple of different ways to do that. You can do that with a formula, or you can do that with a suppression. So let's really quickly cover that suppression, because I think it's important to know as far as the section is concerned. So when you're dealing with this section, you have something called a section expert. These are sections: page header, report header, group header, details. If I go to details and I click on section expert, I can define what details I want to show up in that field. And so what I can do is I can hit a suppress formula, and I can make a formula that says suppress anything that's not equal to 100 or greater than 100. So I would say if my invoice number is, not equal to 100, then don't show it. And what this is going to do is give me a pretty blank report. But you can use these suppressions to kind of define those fields and define those variables so that you can suppress out and shrink down report data to give you what you need. So you can kind of see what I did there. I said, give me anything that's not equal to 100. None of those invoices equaled 100, so it didn't give me anything. But you can do that on any of these variables too. So it's another good little pointer to have, because you can really, some of you out there have tons and tons of data, going back to the 90s. So when you're trying to dig through some of these files, it can be really, really, really time-consuming to sort through it. So that's the gist of what this is. I hope I covered some of the basic stuff on there. I do want to take some time to show you a tool that's really kind of cool. I can cover it really simply unless you guys want or have any questions for me to answer. Let me see if I can see the screen. I don't see any questions in there. Looks pretty.
No, I'm not seeing any questions either.
Yeah, and I think I covered a pretty fair amount. I covered kind of the beginning to intermediate portion. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to drop us an email or a note. But I do think that from a high-level point, I did want to show them Visual Cut, just because a lot of people lately have been asking me how they schedule reports. And if you're okay with that, I can show them a little bit about what that's about, or I can cover some other topic in Crystal.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left on the session, so however you'd like to proceed.
Okay. Yeah, let me show you the tools, because when you're dealing with Crystal, a lot of people design the report and they go, okay, that's great. Now what do I do with it? Do I have to go in and do it myself? Do I need to, do I need to print it and distribute it myself? How do I get this report distributed? And one of the tools that we technically like to use and we tell people about is something called Visual Cut. And I have a lot of customers that use this. And basically what this program is it's a scheduler. And it takes a report that you've written. And if you see here, this is just the one that I did as a sample. It's called the in-page invoice report. And it basically goes out and says, export email. So I can define a timetable during the course of a day that says, go out here and run this report every 15 minutes and email it to all these various people. So I'm going to jump in there real quick. It's going to tell me give me an error because I haven't previewed it. But if you see here, what it'll do is it'll let me run it by grouping. It'll let me run it by salesperson. It'll let me export it as a PDF, as a spreadsheet, as multiple different types of file, and I can email it to a group of people or carbon copy people, and I can actually customize the message header and the footers and all of the details within the email. But the nice thing about it is I can schedule it from Task Scheduler so that the report is hands-off. Once it's designed, I can burst it out to many people, however many times a day, and I never have to think about it. The program is really, really phenomenal. It's a great program. I use it on a lot of my customers, and it's just, it's a really functional tool if you're going to be using some type of, if you need the ability to schedule out or to distribute web or email reports. The other thing that this does is it actually has a simple web interface where you can dump the file to a web portal and it'll actually put it up on the intrawebs, if you will. So a couple of cool functions there. It's really simple, fluid interface. The setup is pretty simple. It doesn't take long to set up. And the scheduling is simple. So if you come in here and you look on, and I'm going to get an error, but going to try to get through it so I can show you the scheduler, because most people go, oh, it's a Microsoft Windows scheduler. I have no idea how to use that. But it's really functionally simple, and this is a good one to look at. So, sorry, I think it's here. Yep. Let's see if it lets me in. Okay, so you see, this is kind of a sample, how it says, go out, run this export, run this file, run this report, dump it out to PDF, attach it, but I only want it for this product type in this year, for this report, and I want it to run at a certain frequency. And what it does is, here, it allows them to put in all kinds of variables like your company logo and things like that. And then it dumps it up to an HTML page and lets them preview it from there. So the tool is very, very good. It's very informative. It's very good if you're going to try to schedule crystal reports, and the two kind of go hand in hand. With that, if you guys want any more information on that, just reach out to me. I know some of you on here have me on your direct connect. And that's fine. If you have any other questions, just shoot me an email. Or if you want to review anything, I think it's recorded, so you have that as well. But keep an eye out for our more advanced courses. I'm going to kind of cover the more advanced formulas, using variables to filter data, things like that. And some of you guys might really like those portions, because it might be kind of up your alley for the advanced stuff. With that, I don't know, is there any questions? Or
We do have a question. A question was from Wendy, and she wanted to know if you can copy a form and edit it and have it be accessible to refresh outside of Sage.
For Crystal?
Yes, I'm assuming for Crystal, yes.
Yes, you can take a form, copy the form, and not run it within Sage, but refresh it. So let me just quickly cover that. Within Sage here, there is a repository of forms. So if you look at the company codes that you're looking, like for example, I'm going to look at XYZ. In here, there's a reports directory, and in here I have a form. This form it's running through Sage. It's running through, Sage as far as how it's working. Forms aren't really good to copy, and I'll tell you the reason why. Forms, when they generate, they're generating a work file that's creating a work file at the time of the print job. So if you try to generate, like make a copy of that form and put it in like the desktop and run it from the desktop, and there's no active connection to Sage, your data is going to be nil. But if you come into this folder under Sage, there's a reports directory here, right here. It's under the Sage path, and usually your path will be different. But if you look at any of these, like aged invoice report, right? This is the standard report that runs in Sage, but it's based not off work files, but actual files. So let's copy this out, and let's take this and just put it in the desktop. Now I'm not running this through Sage, and I can actually come in here and customize it the way I want. And you'll see here, actually this one is a bad one because it is using a work file. But if it doesn't have this work file in it, you can basically copy it, modify it, run it off the Sage system without actually being in Sage. Does that answer your question, Wendy?
Yes, that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, and I'll if you want to talk about that off this training session, Wendy, feel free to reach out, because I know what you're talking about, and you just got to make sure you're not using a work file. That's all it is. But yeah, you can basically copy and utilize any kind of report that's using the straight file, like a header or a detail or anything like that. So does anybody else have any questions? Or
I think we're good. So, George, I want to thank you for an awesome presentation on Crystal 101. We'll be doing this more often, hint, hint. So thank you very much. I think it was informative, a great learning tool, and I really appreciate everyone's time. Hope to see you soon. Everyone have a great afternoon, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.